What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, it is my first time playing Crysis. Now, this was not on the docket going into the month of July. This is one that I just started on a whim, finished it. It was a pretty short game, short and straightforward, got it done, and now we're going to make a video about it. I got some thoughts, good and bad, about Crysis. So without further ado, let's dive in. There are only a few points that I want to hit on when it comes to Crysis, but the one that I'm probably going to spend the most time talking about is the gameplay, because although it might not seem like it, there is a lot here for what is shown. So first off, what I want to dive into first is the nano suit. So you are placed in the future as the time of this game released in 2007. This game is set in 2020, so as of recording this, we are past that. All the stuff that is in this game, tech-wise, future-wise, we don't really see in the real world. That's just what they thought would be the future 13 years after they put out the game. So it's kind of cool to see that, where we're already past the setting of this game. It was set in 2020, set on an island, and there's a lot of future tech, including the nano suit, which is the big gameplay. Kind of, it revolves a lot around the nano suit, the gameplay does, because there's a lot you can do with just this simple suit. So first you have your health, and then you have energy. Health is pretty basic. Obviously you get shot, you lose health, but the energy is where everything kind of comes into play. So the energy is used when you sprint. You have a normal sprint if you run out of energy, but every time you go to sprint, you have full energy. You have like a super sprint. You go really fast, and then after that runs out, you just have a normal sprint. You can use that to get around the map a lot quicker. But you also have a couple of abilities that go along with your nano suit, including a cloak. You have a cloak that you can use with a button press, and that's how the stealth kind of comes into play in this game. The faster you move, the faster your energy ticks down, and when that hits 0, your cloak is gone. So the nano suit is kind of a cool way, I think, of giving some strategy to the player, because you have this energy to worry about where you can't cloak all the time, and you can't also use armor mode, which is the second ability. You can't use that all the time. You use armor mode, and it basically takes the shots on your energy instead of your health, and when your energy runs out after you get shot too much, that's when it starts affecting your health. So the strategy is when to use armor mode, when to use cloak, and how much to use those at a given time. And it's a really cool gameplay idea to kind of tie these to your nano suit, and I think it works throughout the entire game. I think it's a very cool idea. It gives some strategy, some more in-depth gameplay than you would expect when you just look at this game just from a base value. You get more strategy with that nano suit, and I think it does a lot of good things, a lot of cool things. You do have a super jump at some point that you can get, and that also drains your energy. There's a couple of other abilities you get, but a lot of the gameplay revolves around the nano suit, which I think is a very cool idea, and it's done pretty well, giving the player some strategy when it comes to moment-to-moment gameplay. So the nano suit does do a lot with the gameplay, but just the basic gameplay in itself is pretty fine. It's just solid, nothing crazy. It feels pretty good to shoot enemies early on in the game. I will say that I think the first half of the game is a lot better than the second half. The second half, I'd say maybe like the last third of the game, really takes a turn where I can see where they kind of try to switch it up with how the story is going, and you do fight a new enemy type. But I don't think that enemy type is as fun to fight as just your normal soldiers. Let's just say that. Don't want to spoil anything. If you haven't played Crysis, I know it's an older game, but I haven't played it until just now, so I don't want to spoil anything. So I think the first 2/3 of the game are a lot more fun gameplay-wise than the last third of the game. I think the soldiers, the AI is pretty solid. Sometimes they can, have some stupid moments, but for the time, I'd say, I think it's a pretty solid gameplay, combat, nothing crazy. What is cool also is the weapons in this game. You can do on-the-fly attachment swapping. Now, the only game I've seen this in before was Battlefield 2042. I know that's a crazy pull. This is the only game that I have seen do on-the-fly attachment swapping, which is a pretty cool idea. And I honestly thought that this was the only game, 2042, to have done that before. I thought this was a brand new idea. Apparently not. When I played Crysis, it's in Crysis, and it's a way older game, and I think it does it pretty well. There's not a lot of attachment options. You know, you got different sights. You have 3 or 4 different sights. You got like a silencer, grenade launcher attachment, flashlight, laser sight. Not a lot of attachment options, but it is a cool concept, and it is done pretty well in execution. I just wish that the variety was there a little bit more. Not really just with the attachments. I think that is fine, but also the weapons. There's not a lot of weapons to mess around with in the sandbox. You have your AK, your like M4 style weapon, you have an SMG, you have a shotgun, you have a pistol, there's a rocket launcher, there's a Gauss rifle that you get later on, and then there's a really cool alien style weapon that you get towards the end of the game. But the sandbox and the weapon variety is not that big. It's honestly, gameplay wise, probably the weakest part of the game. I think more weapon variety would have helped this game a lot, because throughout the, pretty decently short, I'd say it took me 6-7 hours to finish this game. I'm using pretty much the same weapons the entire time, not really switching it up. I think there is a precision rifle, kind of like a sniper rifle, that you get. So like, I'm trying to switch it up, just to switch it up for the sake of not using the same gun, and that not being super boring. But not a lot of weapon variety. It didn't really allow me to do that a whole lot. You kind of see the enemy use the same weapon, so you're picking up the same weapon over and over again. So if you run out of ammo, your only option is pretty much like 1 or 2 options that the enemy has for you to pick up and use. So I'd say weapon variety, not great in this game. I do wish there were a couple more weapons just to spice things up. The attachments, I think they're fine. Like I said, a couple more would have been cool. But for what's there, I think it gives you enough choice to really customize your weapon. But I do wish there were more. But the concept of on-the-fly attachment swapping is a really cool idea, and I think it does work in this game very well. But just going back to normal gameplay, like I said, I think it's fine, solid. Nothing crazy. It feels good to shoot enemies. This game can be actually pretty difficult, I'd say, if you're playing not the right way. If you're going in this, playing it like, let's say, a Call of Duty campaign or something like that, I mean, you can get melted pretty easily, dying just a couple of shots if you're not utilizing the armor mode or the cloak, utilizing that nano suit to the best of its ability. If you're playing it just like a normal standard first-person shooter and you're not really taking advantage of the nanosuit, I think it can be pretty difficult. So the game kind of pushes you in that direction to really use the nanosuit to the best of its abilities, instead of just not using it, playing it like a normal shooter, and you can die pretty quick. So I do think it can get pretty difficult. It's not a bad difficult, because you have to play the game the right way to be able to make it through certain parts of the game. Overall though, gameplay solid. You do get these open levels, which are really cool. You have, I think there's like 10 or 11 missions, and for the most part they do take place at the same island on the same setting, which we'll talk about in just a second. But they are pretty open. You do get some secondary objectives, which are pretty basic. There's nothing crazy with those. They just give you kind of like a secondary reward, like you might be able to find a weapon armory at your objective that you wouldn't be able to find if you didn't go and do it. But usually most of the time the secondary objective is just going into a building and you just get some intel. You find some intel from a computer, you download it, and that's pretty much it for that. But it's nice to have something extra to do instead of just the main path, the main story. But I think where this game does it very well is the levels are open. You do get vehicles that you can use, a decent amount of vehicle variety. You have, your Humvees with guns on it, trucks with guns on it, your pickup trucks. You do get to drive some boats. That's really cool. And it kind of gives you a little bit of player freedom to approach these encounters in your own way of how you get there. I think that is pretty cool. I didn't expect that going in with the vehicles and being able to kind of approach things the way that I want. I think that was pretty cool. I would say that, like I said, maybe a little bit more vehicle variety, but that's not as important to me as the weapon variety is, because you're obviously on foot a lot more than you are in the vehicles. But I do think the vehicles add a cool dynamic to the game, and being able to, like I said, approach each situation kind of how you want to. If you want to take it by boat, if you want to storm in with a truck, if you want to go in on foot, the game does allow you to do that. A couple more things I want to touch on when it comes to gameplay just really quick. Stealth, like I said, you do have the nano suit that gives you the ability to cloak. You know, it's fine. I feel like that could have been done a little bit better, and giving you that option to, it gives you the option to cloak, but the stealth in itself is not all that rewarding. It doesn't feel all that great to pull off, because every time you shoot in your nano suit, the cloak goes away, and that kind of defeats the purpose of being able to silently take down enemies from a distance and stuff like that. I think the stealth can be done a little bit better. It gives you that option to cloak, but the stealth is just, it's not all the way there. I'd say it's okay, but I wish it was better just to give you that option. But also another thing that's pretty good in this game that I did not expect is destruction. You do have a lot of buildings that you'll go through in this game, and the buildings are very easily destructible if you want that to happen. And obviously with a lot of games, that's a good thing, because it creates this crazy dynamic where one second you'll have cover, the next you don't. And this game does destruction and having that dynamic to the gameplay very, very well, just to spice things up. For 2007, I'd say, like, destruction wise, very, very good. Adds a lot to the gameplay. Overall though, gameplay I think is solid to good. There's some parts about it which I'm not a fan of, but not anything. I'd say the biggest complaint I have is the weapon variety, but overall, weapon variety and the gameplay and who you're fighting in the last third of the game, I'd say those are the weakest parts, but nothing that stands out in a very bad way. Everything is either good to solid or just okay. Now I want to touch on the visuals and the setting of Crysis, because that's a big thing. A lot of people, when it comes to talking about Crysis, they talk about the visuals. The big thing is back in the day, 2007, when this game came out, PCs, the big thing was, can it run Crysis? And it's just because visually this game is, for the time, it still holds up. I played it on Xbox, so I played it on the Xbox 360 version. I did have the ability to play it on PC. I just wanted achievements, and if I'm being completely honest with you, I didn't think there'd be too much of a difference. That I was kind of wrong about. I think that if you have played this game and you played it on the Xbox, there's definitely, I haven't played the PC version, but I feel like it's definitely worth playing it at least a little bit, maybe even through it again on PC, and I kind of do want to try and see how much this game really holds up visually on a PC, so I might check that out. But I did play it on Xbox, and I think it was, from what I've heard and what I've seen actually, the inferior version to PC, not just because of graphics. I still think it looks pretty good graphically for 2007 on Xbox, but there are some things missing from the Xbox version that are in the PC version, like the second to last mission is just completely cut out on Xbox. It's on PC, you cannot play it on Xbox, because I was looking, I was like, okay, there's 11 missions, but I just completely skipped over that second to last mission, and it kind of felt weird story-wise, but I don't know if that mission had a whole lot riding on it story-wise. It might have just been that gameplay part. I'm not entirely sure, but Crysis on Xbox, definitely an inferior version to the PC version, so I am playing the Xbox version. That might, sway you a different way, hearing my opinions from the Xbox version, but that's just how I played it. I think everything, for the most part, it still looks good for 2007, but I know it could look better on a PC. Also, what I didn't touch on in the gameplay section was the gameplay feels good, but it can feel clunky at some points. I think that's also an Xbox thing. I think it would feel a lot better on PC, so that's why I didn't really touch on that too much. It felt clunky at some points, but it wasn't clunky in like a super bad way where I didn't want to play it. I do know for sure that it would play a lot better on a PC. So visually, on Xbox, it still looks pretty good, but on a PC, if you play it that way, I do think that is the best version to play for sure. I just wanted achievements. That's why I played it on Xbox. I do like going for the achievements, but playing it on PC is definitely the way to go. Now with the setting, this is something where I think another part of the game that could be done a whole lot better. It's just a lot of the same setting for the most part. You're set on this island. It's a very tropical island. So you're seeing trees and beaches, water, stuff like that. And it's just a lot of like green, brown, and yellow. And it doesn't really switch it up. It tries to in the second or the last third of the game when that kind of story beat hits and things kind of switch up a little bit. But it didn't really do enough for me to, give it props. I don't think the environment and variety there was all that great. I think that could have been a lot better because it's pretty much just the same setting throughout the entire game. There is a cool part in that maybe middle till later third where the things switch up and you do have this cool setting where setting wise it's really cool. Gameplay wise I don't think it was all that great, but anyways, setting I think could have been done a lot better, but visually for 2007 on the Xbox version of the game, it does still hold up. Now the last thing I want to talk about is the story, which I think just at a base opinion, to just give you a base opinion, it is okay to solid. It's really not the shining point of this game. I think that it does enough to get you through the game, get you along with the the gameplay and the missions and stuff like that, but it's not anything to write home about. I'm not going to remember anything really from this story. Basically, the whole concept is that you are a part of this special force. You do have some interesting characters, a part of your squad at the beginning that you do go throughout the game with, but they're not like all that crazy interesting. You kind of remember their names, but they don't really, they're not great characters. They're okay characters like Prophet and Psycho that you'll meet in the beginning of the game that go throughout the game with you. But for the most part, you take on this story as a lone wolf. You do have some parts of the story which I really do like where, you're with a squad or you have, AI with you, even though they might not be doing a whole lot. It just helps to have the AI there for story purposes to feel like you are a part of a unit instead of lone wolfing everything, which you kind of do throughout the game anyways. So the plot of this game is you are playing as Nomad, a part of a Special Force squad, and you do get a distress call from someone who tells you that in the middle of these islands they have found something that could change the world, and North Korean forces are already there to take control of the islands, so that is your enemy throughout the entire game, and that's your goal, is to figure out what is going on this island, what is this that they have found that could change the world. And very basic plot premise. I think there's a lot that could have been done with it, and there are some pretty decent story moments, but for the most part, like I said, it's just kind of there. The villain of the game is not that interesting. When you fight him, it's not a very good fight. I'll just go ahead and say that. I think the story is probably the weakest part of this game. It's just kind of there. The gameplay and the visuals outshine it, but I think story-wise, I'm very surprised that Crysis got a sequel just because of the story not being that great. At least to me. Maybe a lot of people liked it. I think the story, if you come into Crysis just looking for a fun time and you're not really looking for a good story, it gets the job done. But if you're coming in and you want, a decent story to carry you through this game, I don't think that Crysis gives it to you. It's just a 6 to 7 hour game, very linear. You do have the open levels, but linear in a, mission to mission sense, where, character dialogue is just there, story is just there, characters are just there, and what's really carrying you are the, pretty cool ideas in the gameplay department and the visuals. So I'd say story definitely the weakest part of Crysis. So that is going to do it for the video. Thank you guys for watching and hanging out talking about Crysis, my first time finishing it. Like I said, gameplay wise, I think there's a lot of cool ideas and it sticks most of them. I think the gameplay is solid to good. It does get you to the game and the first 2/3 of it. Towards the last third, I'm not too big of a fan of that. I was having a lot more fun gameplay wise in the first 2/3 of the game. Visuals and setting still does hold up graphically for 2007. I think the setting could be done a lot better in terms of the variety that you are, playing these missions. It's pretty much the same environment throughout. It does try to change it a little bit, but for the most part, it's a lot of the same. And the story is not that great. If you're looking for a game that, you're not really focused on the story, you don't really care about the story, then you're going to have a good time, I think. But if you're coming in looking for a decent story, I don't think Crysis really gives it to you. But overall, I'd say this is a very solid game. There's not a lot. I don't think the story is bad enough to where it really drags the game down, but it does bring it down just a little bit. But it's not offensively bad. It's just kind of bad. It's just kind of there. I don't think the story's all that great, but it's solid when it comes to gameplay. I think it's a very solid game. I don't have any big complaints. Main complaints are just story, but I don't think that's a big complaint. I just think it kind of weighs down the game a good bit. But overall, Crysis, very solid game. I do look forward to checking out the second and third game because there is a trilogy that I'm surprised I didn't even know there was a Crysis trilogy. I feel like Crysis is a series that isn't talked about a whole lot, and they're even making a fourth one apparently. They announced in 2022. We'll see if we ever get anything from that. So I'm intrigued to try out 2 and 3, make videos on those and see how the whole trilogy wraps up, if they do get better with each entry or if they do get worse. Interested to see that. So thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more videos down the line, and I'll talk to you later.